I first met Rob in the early days of Roam when I created the CSS Slack channel for those of us who were hacking the look and feel of Roam to make it suit our needs. And Rob has since become not only a Roam guru, pretty impressive what you're doing there, but also quite an expert in the PKM space for getting things done and producing, really quality content. So when Rob started using Obsidian for many of his private and public evergreen nodes, I had to get him on the program here. And Rob, it's wonderful to have you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really glad to be here. I mean, I would just say I'm in general a fan of tools that let me do what I'm trying to do. I don't really see myself as even as like a productivity person, or even necessarily that I'm not even necessarily that productive myself. I just like tools that enable me, and nonlinear hypertext writing sort of platforms like Roam and Obsidian are incredible for me because I manage multiple projects at once. Like a little bit of background on me is I have two jobs, right? One is I'm a behavioral product strategy and gamification consultant. I do that independently, so I'm self-employed there. And then I'm also a behavioral product strategist for Sparkwave, which is a startup studio led by Spencer Greenberg in New York. And I do the same thing in that role. So what does that all mean? It means that I read a lot of behavioral science papers. I play a lot of video games. I try to figure out how does it influence how can we influence user behavior? Because something that I think is really core to products is that it really depends on how you use them, how much value you gain out of them. There's probably a lot of people out there who are using Obsidian in extremely advanced ways. There's also a lot of people who are using it in very basic ways. I would say that my usage of it is actually fairly basic, but at the same time, it is very powerful for me in allowing me to connect my knowledge. The area where I've started using Obsidian especially is just in the publishing side of things. I don't use Obsidian. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, sorry. No, I think what's really cool and what you're hitting on here, and want to come back to the publishing in a second, but what's really cool is you have such an interesting use case model where you use both Roam and Obsidian. And I want to dive into how you make that work. And you're going to share your screen and do that.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, you were just kind of touching on it. What led you to this, this two-pronged kind of approach to personal knowledge management?
I guess I realized that when people try to draw one-to-one comparisons of Roam and Obsidian, I think that's really where the problems lie. Because I see them as two very distinct tools that have different skill sets, and so I like to focus on where I think each of the tools are strong rather than thinking like, oh, how will I replicate my Obsidian, or how will I replicate my Roam workflows in Obsidian?
Sure.
If I'm trying to do that, Obsidian's not going to work, but if I'm using Obsidian in the way that I'm using it now, which is essentially as like text file management, like I have it set up so it's connected to my blog. And I can very easily, just through a few terminal commands, send a bunch of updates from all of these text files from a folder on my Dropbox straight to my website.
Cool. And can't wait to see this. Yeah. It's cool. And I like how you say that. And I would agree. I think that Roam targets has a certain model, has certain use cases, has a certain kind of vibe and environment that draws some people. And Obsidian has its own use case, its own set of features, its own environment that draws people. And so I think what's unusual about your case, which is really what I can't wait to dive into, is using both, because many of us have, started and Rob, you and I, we were, in those early hacker days of the CSS. I remember when I created that channel and you were just getting started with your CSS stuff in those days. And then you took that little hack that I put together and you blew it up into some really impressive themes that you did. So that was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we can hop into screen share in a sec if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, I guess I really do want to stress that I think that the tools for thought space is really big, and it's really early, and so I think that when people are trying to draw one-to-one comparisons between the products, I think that's usually where one product or the other might end up looking disappointing to one crowd or the other, at the same. So yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people can use Roam and Obsidian for similar use cases, but I think at the edge of each of their capabilities, they go far beyond each other in different ways. And I think that those edge cases of power usage are where I get really interested. But yeah, so I'll do a screen share now.
Awesome.
And I'll say, like, right off the bat, the graph view is much better in Obsidian versus Roam. Can you see my screen right now?
Yep.
Yeah. I like it a lot. I think that it can actually be quite useful in certain situations. So it's like, I'm going to look at this page, difficulty matching. Wait, let me go back to the graph because I just want to be able to browse around here a bit first. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really interesting. One thing that I like a lot is the arrows here. Like, I think that makes it really effective for just like looking around, and
the arrows are bi-directional. They point in the direction of the from link to the to link, which is a nice feature to be able to see. Is this linking from this to this or the other direction? And so the arrows make that very, very easy to see that.
Yeah, I think that when the Obsidian team first mentioned it, I think when the Obsidian team first mentioned the arrows, the way they described it is like, yes, they are bi-directional links, but really there is a direction to them. So like, wouldn't it be helpful to see what that direction is? Which I think is very true. I think it's really cool that I can search the graph and narrow it. So I'm going to search it by difficulty matching and narrow things down. And then that's like a much nicer, much prettier view. And I can like think about how I can navigate this knowledge a little bit more. I will say one thing that I really wish I could do, and I'll describe why a little bit more as I go, but like one thing I really wish I could do is see second degree connections when I highlight. So like I'm aware that I can see there was somewhere in here that lets me see second or third or fourth degree connections.
You can see neighbors, right?
Yeah. The thing that I really want though from that, in the same way that when you hover your mouse over one of the nodes and it shows you all the nodes that are directly connected to it, I really wish in another color, it would show me the second degree connections highlighted, because the reason why I think that's really important is because I have my website, which is robhaisfield.com. Let me actually see real quick.
Yeah, and it's cool how you have your notes published on your site, including showing within them the notes that link into those at the bottom of each note. Well, maybe not for this one. I don't see any links on this, but
yeah,
other notes.
This one's just a starting page, but like I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that like sometimes I'll have a page that might be like a little bit obscure, like for example, apps with continued user involvement respond to changing user goals over time. if I were able to see the second degree connections when I'm highlighting and see it in that special way, then what that would allow me to do is see, okay, what are the possible paths that people might take in order to get to this note? Because really, like, one of the things that I love about writing in Obsidian, and part of why I think Obsidian is better for my public digital garden than my public Roam. I used to have a public Roam that I would keep up to date. I don't do that anymore. Mostly, I mostly replaced it with this Obsidian vault for my public usage, and I think that's really important because pages are just like a lot more easily readable than block structures are. Yep. It's easier for outsiders to read. And but like, I still want to be able to see, can people actually make their way to this note?
I think that's a reasonable feature request. You should submit that in the forum. One of the cool things about Obsidian, and I know this is true in Roam as well, that feature requests from the community are very actively solicited and listened to. For me, in Obsidian, having gotten to know the developers, it's really impressive how not only receptive they are, but also how in tune they are with the community. So it's not that any idea gets implemented. It's more of what's the general flow, for our mission and our vision and what the community wants, and finding that intersection or that merger of that, and then rapidly turning that out. So you should submit that. I think it's a more request.
I've mentioned it once or twice, but like, I will say, I definitely agree with you. That's something that impresses me a lot about Obsidian and about its like just product development. The two people who are developing the product, they're in the forums all of the time. They're in the Discord group all of the time. So like, they're very aware, I think, of what their users want. And also, they just like publish at such a rapid rate, and they have a very high degree of polish when they publish things as well, which I'm a big fan of. Like, that actually led me to get insider build support for them, like, just because I'm so impressed by the way they've been doing it. And this has been incredibly helpful for me. Why don't we go to a page that is here? So this page is the starting page that I have on my website. So it's same text here as it is there. And the thing that I think is really interesting about writing in hypertext is just that it's about sort of like creating interest paths. Like, I want, like this page right here is meant to be at a very high level, a set of entry points that people have into my public notes. So like, if they're interested in the behavioral product strategy side of things, then they'll click on it. If they're interested in how we can work together, because I do also use it, my website, for professional purposes as well, they can click on that. And really, the point is just like, each of these pages, they're generally very short, and I want people to just say like, oh, let's see what behavioral product strategy is.
And you subscribe to the kind of the atomic note philosophy of trying to keep your pages more focused rather than very long ramblings.
Yeah, I give it my best shot. I will say there have been times where I think the making it too atomic is almost makes things more challenging for the writer and for the reader. Like, I think that at some point, it's like helpful to just group things together. But, in general, I do shoot for that. So it's like, let's see.
I also appreciate that you have at least a fair number of note titles that are sentences and declarative sentences that make it even more obvious what the point of the page is.
Yeah, I think that's really important from the standpoint of information density. So it's like basically, let me find an example that I like here. I'm going to click on the products are fundamentally voluntary page. So this is referring to my idea it's not like my unique idea, right? But it's that like people generally choose to use a product on some level. Like if you're trying to give them a new product, then that means they need to choose to override their current habits. Right. Like you can't just build a habit from scratch. There's a certain like volitional component of it. And this note is actually like very much a basis for a lot of my notes. But the point that I'm trying to make here is like, if I go to this page, adoption requires a baseline of user involvement in order to overcome inertia. Like, let's just read some of this out loud real quick. Like just this first paragraph is products are fundamentally voluntary and your product takes effort to use. Speak to the user with a shared vocabulary so they're able to understand why you're worthwhile. The thing that I think is really interesting about that, I'm going to open this up right to the side of it. The speak to the user with a shared vocabulary note is that if someone has read this and they understand the general idea here of we're trying to communicate to the user in terms of their goals, like we're not trying to show them something in a very abstract sense. I'm not trying to explain like, okay, bidirectional links, they're so cool. Like, here's the data structure side of things. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to show them like, okay, how do bidirectional links relate to one of their goals or something like that?
Right. So it's not selling. It's more touching a pain point or touching an opportunity and having them connect with that and feel that and resonate with that.
Exactly. Like they should see that product feature and understand what it's about and like how it fits into their lives. Like that's what I'm referring to when I say speak to the user with a shared vocabulary. But like, so that just means that here in this tiny little 2-sentence paragraph here, just think about the density of information that I just put there. Like if someone has read my digital garden and they've seen both of those pages already, then they can read that paragraph and know immediately what it's about because the title of the page, that products are fundamentally voluntary, substitutes for the entire idea of everything that's written on the page. In the same way, speak to the user with a shared vocabulary. That title becomes the shorthand for the whole idea, which is expressed on the page.
The other thing about that as well that I like is that, and sometimes the titles don't come first, sometimes they come last. Yeah. But when you have them there and when you're editing or when you're reviewing, it sort of helps bring a focus to the note versus if the note was titled user experiences, that could go all over the place. And is this note done? Is this note at a point yet where I want to share it, where I've elaborated my thoughts on this enough? I don't know, because it can always keep going versus very focused, speak to the user with a shared vocabulary. Okay, I know what I'm thinking. I know what this means to me. I know how I'd like it to resonate. And how do I capture that? Okay, I've done that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so tell us how you have your site live tied into this, because Obsidian Publish for most of us is just a separate site that we can publish our notes on, but you've incorporated them into your website, your live website, which is cool. Do you want to show us that, how you do that?
Yeah, so here we are. This is, like my website is a theme. Some guy made a Jekyll theme. Let me see what his name is. His name, I think, is like Raghuveer. And he made a Jekyll theme that has all sorts of interesting things in it. Like, I'm going to just go back here and just show off a little bit, like what it does. Like I have backlinks to each of the notes that shows like a little bit of a preview of what each of those.
That's very Andy Matuchak sort of note looking, those links. It looks beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm trying to think. Yeah. And then it also has a few other really neat things. Like, for example, it has, you'll see here, I have margin notes too, which I just love because I am very prone to go off on tangents sometimes. And I think that
That's
it's
cool.
fun to be able to use them.
Yep.
But so it's a Jekyll theme that takes markdown files and turns it into that website that you
Yep.
see, that you just saw. And so right now I'm in Visual Studio Code.
VS Code.
Yeah, that's the one. I'm not a programmer, so I don't use the same shorthand, same lingo.
You just play one on TV.
Yeah, I just play one on TV.
You said you were not a CSS designer, and then you took, was it red graphite? I forget which one I started with. You took, or no, it was another bear theme. I made some bear theme, and then you took that and you made it so impressive what you built. That was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I can show real quick, just like for a little show and tell. Let's see. Yeah, like I've got this theme right here, and this is just like on my public website or my public Roam, and it just looks really pretty. Then there were also some changes to things where it's like got a masonry mode that lets you have many pages open at once. But really, I'm not someone who understands CSS. I'm just someone who is able to copy paste from a lot of other people's CSS. Is how I phrase it. So none of what you see in there, except maybe some of the coloring stuff, is original. But anyway, I guess like back to the Visual Studio VS Code side of things. What I really like about Obsidian and what I think makes it so effective for having a public website is that it's just a file, or it's just a folder on your computer. So like in Visual Studio, I was able to open up the folder that has, I was able to open up the folder that has all my notes that are going onto the website, which is the same folder that I have open in Obsidian. So like right here, this that you see right here that I'm toggling on and off, that's the exact same.
That's your vault.
That's my vault.
Yep.
Yeah. So it just fits really nicely. Yeah.
Okay, so you have them in VS Code. And then do you have a compiler that pulls that down? A process you use to get that onto your site? And is your site built on, what is your site hosted on?
It's hosted on, my site is hosted just via Jekyll, and I use, Netlify too. Because basically what's happening here is that I have a GitHub. I have some GitHub there. I don't really know what to call it. GitHub repository.
Yes.
And I set my terminal open, and I just like set the directory to my personal website, which is the name of the folder that contains all of the code for my website. And it's really quite simple. I just write git add period. And I guess that prepares it to put it out there. I don't actually fully know what each of these does. Right. I worked with Salman. Let me see what his last name is. I forget it's slipping my mind now, but
it's cool. Yeah. So basically you have a process you use to create a branch, commit your changes to that, and then that's what your site pulls to display.
Yep. Every time I update my GitHub with these 3 terminal commands, then within like 5 or so minutes, my website is updated. So I've been loving that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So take us back, because I love what the stuff you write about. I love the stuff that you do around user experience, and what a cool job you have to like play video games, like for work. That's pretty cool. But back up a little bit. And so you were deep in Roam. You still are, and you use Roam. But at some point, as Obsidian evolved, and you thought, "Ooh, I kind of like the way this does, these things that you've been showing so far." So have you, what have you pulled out of Roam? What are you still keeping in Roam? What do you do in Roam? What do you do in Obsidian? Give us a day in the life of Rob Haisfield. Okay, I'm in Roam for these types of things. When I'm doing this, I come over to Obsidian and here's, how do you balance the two?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, when I do almost everything in Roam. So it's like when I'm researching, so like if I'm reading a paper and I'm taking notes on that, I'm doing that in Roam. If I'm thinking through a problem, like one of the products that I work with is called Guided Track. And I'm working on the onboarding for them. And so it's like, if I'm thinking through something, I literally just I type out my thoughts as I'm thinking them. Like I'm not the sort of person.
Right. And in outline, you kind of use the outliner in Roam as you're doing that. It's kind of how you process that.
Yeah, because just the outliner and the way that indentation works, it makes it really easy to organize bullets on the fly and organize page references and the linkages between them on the fly.
Sure.
I use it for just developing on my thoughts over time. Like, again, I need to write things down. I can't just lean back in my chair and rub my chin to think through something that doesn't work. Right. I use it for a CRM. I use it for journaling. But what I use Obsidian primarily for is for this blogging side of things, which right. I've tried doing in Roam before, and it just doesn't work for me in Roam.
So all these notes that we're looking at here, are these exclusively in Obsidian that you or
right.
You start something in Roam and bring it into Obsidian?
Usually I'll start something in Roam and bring it to Obsidian. Not all of the time, but usually. Sometimes if I'm just really feeling it, I'll just write out a note in Obsidian and it'll be directly into it. I just go for it and assume I'm going to update the note over time. But where they play together, because what I've described so far is a very separate set of workflows. But the area where they play together is I will use Roam. I'll have the same page titles for things in Roam as I'll have in Obsidian. And so that way, it's really easy for me to just search really quickly. What do I still have to do with respect to this specific note? And then I can use that to help me manage some changes that I've been wanting to do. I'll use it to keep track of feedback that I receive, and the fact that I keep the same note titles between them really helps me keep my sanity, I guess, sure. In that respect. But
do you use tags to track state, if you will? Okay, this is in this state and I need to evolve it to this state, or not?
Not too much, no. Okay. Because what you'll see here is in this note, titles speak to the user with shared vocabulary, tags, behavioral product strategy. I have some YAML front matter there. And so if I am on my website, let me go here and go to, let's see, what was that note? Speak to the user. Shared vocabulary. Sometimes the search isn't super good. So what I usually do, though, is just because of the way that all these notes are linked together, it's really easy to find
to get from one to the other. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my main goals with this website is to make it so people can quickly find what they're looking for if they're looking for something specific. But alternatively, if people don't know what they're looking for, and they come to my website, I still want them to find what they're looking for, if that makes sense. And the general pathway that follows is through the links. So it's these concepts are related to each other. So I know if I go to this page, it probably won't be too long if I just click around on things that I'll make it to this note, speak to the user with a shared vocabulary. But you'll see here, I'm zooming in now, is this tag behavioral product strategy shows up there. That was actually just someone gave me the feedback. They thought it would be helpful to have things sorted a little bit. So I just tried using tags. I don't really know how much I care for them, how useful I think they are. With regards to status, I prefer to just kind of like say on my website, like, these are ideas in motion. I'm iterating on every page as I go. And I just kind of like want to set that expectation for users or for readers. But the way that I will use it is that like I'll use it to like manage sorts of like content pipelines. And again, this kind of goes into how I use both of them together. So it's like here I have a query set up for my premises. And then there's ideas to develop. And then there's ideas that I've published. And here I'm able to very quickly see like, oh, I have not, I have not developed these ones yet, but I have determined that they are premises worth developing. Like a premise is just any idea that comes to me at any point in time. Whereas something to develop is a premise that I have decided is worthwhile to develop. So it's like, that's really where I'll use tags. Again, it goes more towards this idea of like, I think that Obsidian is fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic at a lot of things beyond what I use it for. But I think for my use case, what it's fantastic for is for nonlinear hypertext writing and publishing that writing. In terms of pipelines and productivity and such, I really find Roam to be just like a little bit better tooled for that. But yeah, so that's kind of like how I handle tags.
Cool. One thing I just wanted to, I noticed that you call this your digital garden. And it's I'm reminded of the last guest we had here on Obsidian Office Hours, who's also very active in the Obsidian community, Brian Jenks. He is big in this garden metaphorical language, if you will, for his notes as well. And so he calls his initial notes, I think, seedlings that then sprout. Maybe they start before seedlings, but then they eventually become these evergreen trees, if you will. I see a lot of the garden metaphor through here. So that's kind of cool. So it's neat to see how you make this work across both, and it makes sense what you're describing. So within Obsidian, the graph which you started out showing, and you have an impressive looking graph there, it'd be cool to have that on your site as well, to sort of allow your users to kind of see a not the whole giant graph, because that might be a little intimidating, but a local graph when they're on a note, to sort of see where that sprouts out to. See, I'm sticking with that garden language there. See what sprouts out to or sprouts into your notes there. Yeah, so that'd be kind of a cool thing to include in that. And I agree with you. I think the graphing in Obsidian is ridiculous, and the developer put a lot of effort into that, and obviously it shows both in how it looks as well as the performance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I mean, I think that until they added the search side of things and like incorporated that in with the graph, I thought that like the graph still wasn't really all that practical, because I think that a big graph with a lot of notes, like I'm just going to remove this search real quick. A big graph with a lot of notes, it's really hard to make sense of this.
No,
you know,
it's
like,
eye candy.
and I mean, and I mean, yeah, exactly. It's eye candy. And this isn't even that big of a database, because it's like, this is what's going on my website. So there's only like 60 or 70, or there's somewhere around 100 files in here.
Yeah.
But I think that adding this search component of it is so cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually really helpful. I think that it would be, and I think that it's really cool that you can do like any sort of search too. Like I'm going to search like failure and difficulty. Like I like that there's the Boolean search there as well.
Right.
Like that's where I think that the graph is actually starting to be useful, because like you really need to make it smaller in order to make it something that actually makes any sense. But yeah, I agree that having the graph on my website would be cool. At this point, I guess it goes back to like how we were talking about me with CSS. Like I'm playing a developer on TV. And so it's like with my Jekyll theme, I have a bunch of modifications to it that I have made with the help of others, with the very patient help of others. And on top of that, though, it's like I don't really know how to make all too many of those changes myself. I've considered, I think that Obsidian Publish is really interesting. And I think that it has very cool use case. I think that it looks very aesthetically pleasing. I'm really excited to see the direction it goes. Though that being said, even though I can't make these changes, I struggle to make these changes to my website on my own. I still want to be able to make these changes.
Yeah.
Like there's something about having that ability to hack it and to like work with someone and say like, oh, I really want to have a graph view, so I'm gonna hire someone to add a graph view to this, and I can do that. And the Obsidian one, it doesn't seem like it's there yet. It seems like that's a direction they're going. It doesn't seem like it's there yet.
You can have your own custom CSS for Publish. So
right.
There's
but
a lot
I
you
want to
can
be
do.
able. Yeah. Like, and I get that, but like I have some ideas for like a UX for my digital garden that are a little bit more unique. For example, like in Andy Matuszczak mode,
right.
That is something that is an established need that people have. Like people have seen Andy Matuszczak's notes and they're like, wow, those are so cool. I love that UX. I want that on my
that
website
we built that
too.
into Publish.
Right. And I'm aware of that. And like what I'm talking about
I
here,
say
though,
we
is that,
as if I developed it. I did not.
Right.
I developed Andy's notes. I did not develop the code, the JavaScript that enabled that to happen. That was the great work of the developers, built on the great work of the Andy Matuszczak mode that Gordon Peterson built inside Obsidian, which is really cool.
Yeah, but it's like, and it is really cool. I just like, I want to be able to do things like I think two-dimensional navigation is really interesting as well, like as a concept. Like I'll go to his notes real quick just to kind of like show off notes.andymatuszczak.com just to like describe sorts of things that I want to be able to do that like don't work if I'm waiting for developers to make it for me. So it's like here the quintessential like Andy Matuszczak mode thing that's cool is like it just like opens up any link that you click on to the right, and then it collapses to the left. I think that's cool. One of my frustrations though sometimes is like I'll go back here to the work with the garage door note, and I'll click on another one like working on niche personally and meaningful projects brings weirder, more serendipitous inbounds. That's super interesting. I click on it, but then all this stuff, the anti-marketing is gone. I don't like that. And so like something that I would
go to publish.obsidian. Okay, so this is what I put in here.
Yeah, okay, so it still does the replacement thing to the right. And so I guess like what I think would be really cool, and I guess I can just demonstrate it in here versus like on his website now, like now that we're here, is I think it'd be really, really fantastic if, let's say I'm on this page and I want to click on another link and keep this here.
Right. You want to squeeze it in between the two.
No, I want to put it on top of programmable attention. So like any notes that I click on from here. So like if I click on evergreen note writing, it'll open on top, and it'll be like it's two-dimensional.
It blows away your stack. I get it. So you want to be able to see the breadcrumbs in there still.
Yep. Yeah, and then if I like have the evergreen note writing one on top of the programmable attention note, and I click on if I click on a link from there, it'll still open to the right of that note. Yep. You know, so like you end up with this like branching tree that shows like various trains of thought. That's something like, I don't know, maybe someone in the Obsidian community wants to do that, but like I just want to be able to do like fun experiments like that. I want to be able to add Google Analytics to my website. Like but I'm definitely keeping an eye on publish to see where it goes, because it seems like it's going in that direction.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So back to your Obsidian notes.
Okay, great.
And by the way, that theme that you saw over there in Andy Matuchak mode, that is red graphite that I took from, somebody in the Obsidian community, and I wish I could remember who it was, built this theme from the bear look and feel, which is, you know, about me that I am a big fan of the bear look and feel note-taking platform. I think you were as well, which is where some of your theme ideas came from that related to that. But yeah, I'm just such a huge fan of red graphite and what that looks like.
Yeah, me too. I think that Bear is one of the prettiest apps that I've ever used for note taking. It's just so, it's very pretty. I love it. I think that Obsidian is actually very pretty as well. You know, I've been very happy with it, even in this like default theme that I'm using.
And
right
you're
now.
and you stay in edit mode. I notice you don't switch over to preview mode.
No, almost never, because like because the thing is, I think that the syntax highlighting for Markdown is good enough in the edit mode that I don't need it. When I have this header, it shows it as a header. It changes the size of it in the edit mode. Like it's not fully what you see is what you get, but if I make this bold, it's going to look bold here. Like that's all I really need for that. So like I don't need to have both. I don't need to have the text open side by side.
Doesn't matter because the WYSIWYG editor is coming anyway. So all these discussions will be moot in a period of time. So
I guess I could talk about the one thing that I really love about Obsidian, and where I think it's very another area where I think that it's just extremely strong, is in this idea of mental stack management. I first got that term when I was talking with Martin Schneider of Remnote, founder of Remnote, and we did a tour.
Yeah, and let me just interrupt just real quick. So Rob does a number of really great interviews of people on his YouTube channel, which we'll link to at the bottom of this. So check out not only Rob's website, but his YouTube channel. He has some really great interviews of people doing cool things in the knowledge management space. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big fan of knowledge management. I mean, most of my tours so far have been in Roam. I've done one one Remnote tour. I've done one dual Roam and Obsidian tour. I'm not I really do want to make clear that, like, despite the fact that I have my own preferences for tools for thought, I'm very just interested in this whole space and like how people all throughout are doing it. So it's like, I haven't done any Obsidian tours on my channel yet, but like, there's no reason I wouldn't. Like, if somebody's doing something that I think's interesting, then I'll absolutely like ask them to come join. But When I was talking with Martin after the Remnote tour, one thing we were talking about was this idea of mental stack management, which is like, I only have so much working memory right now. Like I need to be able to have multiple pieces of information up simultaneously. So like the way that Roam does it is that they have the main view and they have the sidebar view, and you scroll up and down the sidebar. In Remnote, they have two main views side by side. And that's the degree to which they have mental stack management. Whereas in Obsidian, and in Bear, the way that they do mental stack management is I can have like 10 different notes open. Yeah, 10 different windows open at the same time. But like with Obsidian, it makes it really easy to like drag it around, like make the sizes different. One thing that I really like doing, I'm going to go to my habits note. Habits are the wrong thing to focus on for most behaviorally designed applications. This is a frustration I have because a lot of people who read Hooked by Nir Eyal or whatever, like they'll think to themselves like habits, that's all that really matters.
Right. Or Atomic or James Clear's book. Yep.
Yeah. And like, as I was describing earlier, like products are voluntary and people have their default habits from before. If you want people to pick up a new application, then they need to willingly put effort into overcoming previous habits. You're not going to be able to just build habits right off the bat. So like, let's say I'm writing this note out and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what ideas are relevant here? I'm going to open up products are fundamentally voluntary. I'm going to open up let's see. I'm going to open up the difference between user involvement and user engagement. These are all ideas that support me here. And then I can just really quickly create this layout where the main thing that I'm writing about is focused here in the center. And then the other pages that are going to help me write this better are each sized exactly as I see fit. So that way they're able to ambiently like guide my attention.
And you can save that as a workspace so that you don't have to recreate this.
Oh, can you show me how?
Yeah, go into one of those icons is going to be a workspace. And if you don't have it, then go into settings and add it. So hover, see if any of these say save workspace, because I forget what the icon looks like.
Manage workspaces, maybe?
Yep. Yeah,
save
give it a name.
Workspace as habits workspace. Okay, great. Okay.
And now totally destroy all that.
Yeah, great. I'm going to blah, blah, blah.
Even close some of the windows down.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then go to that workspace tab.
Oh, I clicked on open another vault. Manage workspace. That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. I've been asking for something like that publicly on Twitter for like months on every platform that I use. Like I just think I think it's so important. So thanks for showing me that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's a really cool feature. Very, very helpful for exactly that. Okay, now I'm in my habits work mode.
Yeah.
Pull up that workspace and let me get cranking on it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Just going on a tangent just for a second, and I tend to agree with you on the philosophy of what you're talking about here, independent of any tool. The idea of not only do habits take a long time to develop, and do you need the initiative to have to drive that, but there's the sense of you don't really control a habit. You control the things that you do to develop habits. And by focusing on what you can control, there's much more of a sense of not just productivity, but a sense of accomplishment when you focus on that which you control. It's the challenge of goal thinking. When you're always thinking about the goal, you're always failing because you're not at the goal. When you're thinking about what can I do today to help move me closer to that. And you're focused on what you can control. It's a different mindset, but it changes everything. It's a very stoic. Marcus Aurelius was the one who sort of said, focus on desire only that which you can control. And the idea of you can control your actions, your day-to-day actions, you can control your thoughts, you can control your words, right? When you focus on what you can control, your life changes dramatically, especially when you let go of those things that you can't control. Anyway, total tangent. I thought you'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that that's a lot of the sort of thing I'm trying to get at when I'm talking about behavioral product strategy, where I'm really trying to describe, like, okay, what sorts of behaviors would need to happen in order to make a habit occur? Like, right? So if someone's using Obsidian and they are trying to use it for publishing, then we need to figure out how to get them to set up parts of the publish. If we want people to have this sort of like frictionless feel to it, then we need to make sure that users understand and frequently use, like, oh, you can press Command O to quickly open anything. And if you hold Command, then it'll open it in a new pane. And like just having that sort of knowledge and also using those features regularly contributes very heavily to the inherent pleasure that someone gains out of using a product like Obsidian. So I think that it's really important to consider like what sorts of things are within our control. There's also, I will caveat and say that areas where habit type design is really useful is essentially in saying, like, what are these little like tiny mini things that people should be doing?
The BJ Fogg method of very tiny habits. Or tiny
and basically just removing friction and making like, how might we make it so, let's see, how might we make it so people's default behavior is to use the quick switcher when they're opening up pages, as compared to other alternatives.
And the challenge with that is so much of that is unconscious, or at least not overtly conscious, that people are aware of what their default behavior is without having to study that. It's funny that you brought up this topic. I actually was one of the editors for Nir's most recent book, Indistractable. Sort of goes to that same concept.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, what do you think are what sorts of behaviors do you think that Obsidian users need to have in order to be successful in using Obsidian?
It's interesting because from what I see as one of the forum moderators, is all the different kinds of people. You have everyone from high school students and college students up through seasoned executives and entrepreneurs and just all different types of people using it. I think one of the challenges is, especially for people getting started in the whole knowledge management space, is thinking about how you connect your thoughts, because it's so easy to capture some information and then it goes into a black hole. And the idea of, how do I review that information that I captured? And unless you have such an incredible memory that you remember, oh, I remember I wrote a note on that 3 months ago. Let me find that and pull that up. For me, when I was using Bear, and I used Bear for a long, long time, I would go into Bear and I would find notes, and I totally forgot that I was writing on that topic. And I'd already been rewriting on this topic. And some of what I had written before, wow, I wish I had remembered that. And so the idea of connecting thoughts, I don't think comes natural. And I think how to think that way and how to find that kind of information is one of the challenges. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that I think people need to think like Nicholas Luhmann did with his
Right.
Zettelkasten. But I do think a concept of connecting thoughts together, especially disparate thoughts. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm writing on productivity. Let me find the other notes. Or, okay, yeah, I wrote on this. I wrote on this. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're developing your own ideas, when you've elaborated someone else's thoughts, you've incorporated, now you're synthesizing these different pieces and you're coming up with your own thoughts in a way, you know, what you call your evergreen and other people call their evergreen notes. To connect those together and a process by which finding those thoughts so that they're not gone. It's the old adage of if you read a book, but you don't take notes on it, what was the value of reading that book? And if I'm honest, and I look over at one of my bookshelves and I look at a book like, say, The Tipping Point, you know, Malcolm Gladwell, and I think, you know, if somebody asked me what that book was about, I'd say, oh, it was a great book. Well, what was it about? Oof, ideas and when they tip. But I don't remember much else other than, you know, he's a great writer, great stories. And I seem to recall it being a great book. What a waste of time that I spent. No, that's not really true because I got the enjoyment of actually reading.
Sure.
So lately, what I've been doing for the past year or so is when I read a book, not only do I take notes, but I put those notes into a spaced repetition system. Because if it's worth it to me to actually write a note, then it's something that I want to remember forever. And if I don't want to remember it, then I wouldn't have taken a note on it. And so that, I think, that way of thinking, and again, I'm not trying to champion Zettelkasten or space repetition systems. Just what I am trying to sort of look at and explore is how behavior forms around connecting thoughts. That was a long-winded way of answering your question, but hopefully it makes sense to you.
I think that's very fair. And I think like the important thing to remember is that the design of the product will influence people's likelihood to connect thoughts in there. You know, like for example, just the fact that the main organizational system for Obsidian is through page links as opposed to through creating folders for yourself, that in itself already contributes to that. You know, like it doesn't do the full job, but like it contributes and it sets people sort of like on the right path of sort of like saying, what's the default behavior here for organizing your notes? I think that there's, from my analysis of Obsidian, I think that there's a bunch of things. There's that like people just need to link notes as they're writing. Another is they need to write notes in general and like write notes without necessarily knowing where they're going to go at this point, but write things with anticipation of future usefulness. But then they also need this extra other behavior of saying like, okay, if I'm working on something new, but I've already written something about it, can I pull in those notes and start from a not blank page? You know, like, so that's another behavior that I think a lot of people need to learn, because it's like with note-taking apps in general, before I came into this networked thought space, before then, like when I was using Bear, when I was using Apple Notes, when I was using Notion, it was very rare that I would review any of my notes.
For sure.
It was almost like I wrote them and they went into this black hole and they never get resurfaced again. You know, like now, whether I'm in Roam, whether I'm in Obsidian, whether I'm on Twitter, if I'm tweeting something and I've tweeted about it before, then I'm probably linking to those tweets because I'm like saying like in my head, oh, what is that thing? I'm going to do a search and like find those words. I think that there's also another behavior, which I think, which like, okay, I'll say that I think that daily notes work really differently in Obsidian versus in Roam. You know,
You think
like
so? Tell me why you think that, because I think they're similar, but I'm curious how you see them different.
very, very differently. You know, so like I'm just gonna I'll turn on the plugin real quick, just to
Hmm.
just to
It's under
because
core plugins.
yeah, let's say daily
Yep.
notes. There we go. Okay, great. Okay, so how do I create a new
On the
daily
left,
note?
there's a calendar icon. Just click it.
Open
Up.
today's
Yep.
note. Okay, great. So I'm in this note, but the thing is, and this is really just like an area where Roam and Obsidian are doing something very fundamentally distinct, you know, and it's with the information architecture, because Obsidian is based on a page-based information architecture. So everything that is in this page right here, it is linked together to gamification. You
Right, but
know,
also it's block based as well,
in what sense?
in the sense that you could link to just that second paragraph that says other definitions focus too much.
Okay, yes, you can do the block references thing too, but that's not really what I'm getting at here, because
Okay.
it gets at something like a little bit more fundamental. I'll imagine that I'm going to like just copy paste in my daily notes
Yeah.
from today, and we'll take a look at this. Obsidian. Okay, great. So now I've got all of these in here. And if I'm looking through linked references to like Muse app, then I'm going to see the entire content of this page.
Right, because it's a sub bullet of the bullet structure.
Right. Well, because it's just on this page, you know, like in general. Like, so it's, and if I'm searching for, like, let's say I'm doing a search for me, for, let's see, um, for extrinsic for like extrinsic motivation. I'm searching for extrinsic motivation, and I'm searching for personal knowledge management or something.
Okay.
That's the problem is that it would bring up this note,
Mm-hmm.
even though this like bullet hierarchy right here, that's really like the only part that's relevant to Muse. This part right here is not actually relevant to Muse. Whereas like if
Right.
I'm, you know, like
And
if I'm in,
that's where you would use the block reference, or you would create a header and do the header, everything within that header. But I understand what you're saying.
no, I don't think that I'm not sure if you do.
Okay.
And I think that like this is sorry, that
Oh
I
no,
don't
that's
mean to
okay.
question you
I
here, but
love
like
being challenged.
what I'm trying to get at here is that indentation means something in Rome. So it's like this is an entirely separate note from this right here. And so like if I'm looking through the linked references for Muse app, I'm not going to see this note. Like I'm going to go to the linked references now and and you'll see that it like brings up this specific bullet hierarchy. You know,
Right.
it doesn't bring up the entire page. And if I, let's say, filter by instruction manual, then I'm going to see
Yep.
just that right there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the difference here with Obsidian and with the daily notes is that that means if you use it in the same way as Roam, where you put like all of your thoughts into it throughout the day, then you're going to have a really messy set of connections in your linked references. I think when I think of like how to use Obsidian best, given like the
Okay.
rules of how it works, I'm thinking that like I would need to maybe like move this whole block hierarchy and like reterm it as its own page if I want it to be meaningful. through the linked references structure.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. You still could access just the Muse block and everything below it and reference just that and not see the other stuff.
Yeah. I'm just saying if I'm going through the linked references and I click on the linked references, it brings up this entire page.
Now I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I guess what I think's interesting about this though, is that I actually really like that Daily Notes is a plugin for Obsidian and it's not a default included thing. Because I think that if it were a default included thing, then I think people would put a lot more of their notes into that rather than separating it out into their own distinct pages. Like I think separating it out into its distinct pages, that makes Obsidian more powerful. Whereas in Roam, having it in Daily Notes pages makes it more powerful. These are different ways that the products work. And so like, I think that the design of Obsidian not including that as the default makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yeah, for me personally, I will start out streaming on a Daily Note and then extract it into its own note.
Right.
Is what I'll do. And I'll do that just within the Daily Note, give it and make up a name, a new note name, and then click on it to create that and then paste the contents in there.
Yeah, and I think that's like how the Daily Notes in Obsidian are meant to be used. Like I think that the Daily Notes in Obsidian are essentially like an inbox. And I think that if you want that inbox to be really genuinely useful for you, you have to also like have an outbox too, where you're transforming it into things. Whereas in Roam, you just don't need to have an outbox, right? But so it's like I get I see a lot of people using the Daily Notes in Obsidian in that way, in the Roam sort of way, and I ask myself, is there a way that Obsidian could be designed such that people use the Daily Notes as an inbox outbox thing rather than just an inbox that doesn't get revisited? Because that would be a better user pattern for the purposes of knowledge management within Obsidian.
Right.
And like that's the sort of behavioral product strategy type things that I think about. Like, how can we make it so the product leads people to better ways of using it?
I think that's a great line of thinking, a great line of work, great line of research. And another cool thing about Obsidian recent thing is the third-party plugins now and that API being opened up makes it so that some of these types of things could be built and played around with to test that. But I agree with you. I think looking at how people naturally work and then how do you help extend that? How do you use tools to help them extend that in a way that feels natural? And it's a fascinating area of research to see. And I still come back to that you still need a way to remember or find that information, just because it's in there. And you're right, Obsidian makes that easier. And I kind of like the random note feature, which is kind of a nice little, I don't know if you ever use it, but it's kind of a nice little like, oh yeah, that note. But I still think there's more that we can be doing with tools to help remember what we wrote. Because I think another advantage of remembering is it makes synthesis easier and it makes it more powerful because you have at your disposal these disparate ideas that you can pull together. And without them, it's more not only labor intensive, but I'm not sure you get the serendipity that you get if you can remember them. So I think there needs to be some element of, whether it's spaced repetition or some element of remembering as part of it.
Yeah, that's something that I think is really powerful about the Zettelkasten type workflow, and it was one of those behaviors we were describing earlier where it's like, I'm writing about something now, so I'm going to search what I've written before that might be relevant to it. Because what that essentially just means is you're constantly asking yourself the question, what have I written before?
That's right.
You're prompting your memory multiple times repeatedly. And so it's like my Twitter, I have like over 3,000 tweets at this point, but like I'm still pretty good at linking to the relevant things just because I search my Twitter so much. So that makes me really familiar with what I have in there. I think it's the same way with like Obsidian. If you're just like in a habit of searching frequently, then you're going to be more familiar with your notes. How can we maximize familiarity with your notes? So like people don't even necessarily need to remember the exact contents of it, but like that they can get there if they're looking for it. And yeah.
And that is where more atomic notes is a little more helpful than longer stream of consciousness notes, because I think it probably makes it more tactile, more concrete, more remember worthy, if you will.
Yeah. I think that's something that's really effective about like note titles being like full sentences.
Absolutely.
I guess. Like I think that's really helpful because it's easier to remember a claim than it is to remember a specific thing. Like this is one of the counterproductive patterns that people might do in Roam as the comparison, like every app has wrong ways to use them. Like if all I'm doing is tagging keywords like user involvement, user engagement, and I just tag all of those keywords all of the time, that's not always that helpful for me.
No.
Like it would be much easier for me to find something if I'm searching for the difference between user involvement and user engagement. It's easier for me to make a precise link of saying like this relates to that if I'm saying precisely what this and that are. Just saying user involvement, that it's not always clear what that is in this context.
Totally agree.
It's like, having these page names be that, I think is really helpful. Something else that I try to do within the page name is sentences type thing is I try to use some of these keywords within the page names too.
Right.
I know about user involvement. I know about user engagement. And something that's interesting there where, Obsidian will help you out is now if I type in user involvement, then that's like, and I'm just trying to reference that page, then that means I ambiently see a bunch of other page titles for ideas that are related to it. So it's like, I absolutely agree with you that having this readily accessible memory of just saying like, okay, I have this whole body of work, everything that I've written at my disposal. What do I have in it? If you can't answer that, then your note database won't scale, right?
Why even take the note?
I think that like even just writing things down in the first place is helpful sometimes.
If it's your own thought, yes. But if you're capturing something that somebody else thought, and then you forgot that you captured it, then you're going to have to Google it anyway, whether you're Googling inside Obsidian, whether you're Googling inside of Roam, or you're Googling inside of Google.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would even add on to that and just say that like my personal goals for personal knowledge management, I want to have a system where in 10 years, I'm still able to use things that I learned now. It's like I have in the last 2 years or so, I've worked on over a dozen different products. That's so many different projects. That's so many opportunities for synthesis, for learning across boundaries. And so I want to be able to have that all in a written space so I can synthesize it. I'm not relying on the working memory. But at the same time, at this rate, in 10 years, I'm going to have many, many more projects, like I want something, a lot more notes, and I want something that's like durable. I want something that I know 10 years from now that I'll be able to resurface an idea from last year that I think is directly relevant to a project I'm working on now. Yeah. Because I do not want to have a situation where I am 10 years from now relying on my memory, my recent memory for what questions and what ideas come to mind. That's my worst case scenario. And
AI will probably help a bit in this space over the next 10 years, and will become part of these tools. Rob, this has been so cool discussing Roam and Obsidian and knowledge management and note linking with you. And I appreciate all that you're doing in the space, both with helping people with Roam and now becoming an Obsidian user. And it would be cool if you started making some Obsidian videos. That'd be awesome. Yeah. But especially the work that you're doing in user research and user engagement, because I do think that's so important. And we need more passionate, smart people looking at this and helping drive the future of engagement and, the tools, because these tools are going to continue to evolve. And the more guidance that we can, we collectively can provide the tool makers on how we can better engage to connect thoughts with the goal of, the ultimate goal is using our ideas to make a difference in some way, right? Coming up, building on the great work that other people have done, synthesizing that, adding to that, and, being able to touch lives and make a difference in some way. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing in that space toward that end. So thank you. And thanks for showcasing today and showing the cool work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Again, the way that I use Obsidian, as you probably saw, is fairly basic. I just write out my ideas and I connect them. That's like it. And they're my more evergreen ideas. I think that Obsidian has just been incredibly helpful for that. And like one thing that I want to point out too is that I think that it's actually really helpful for that, in part because of some of the limitations of it, right? And some of the intentional choices of it, like having it all be on a file-based system. I think that forces automaticity to an extent. If I have a note that meanders on like 10 different topics that are totally disparate from each other, but they're all on the same page, then that's just not as good and it's not as useful in Obsidian. So like in that moment, if I'm using Obsidian, then I have to think to myself, okay, what are the individual pages that I could break this up and divide it into? And that's like a valuable thing for thought. I think that that's a little bit of behavior design right there. Yeah. And sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, like when I know that we just said that we were ending this, but there's something
this is totally cool. Go.
Yeah, okay. Because there's something that I want to talk about that I think is really, that I think, again, it's a valuable part of Obsidian, and the fact that there are some limitations to Obsidian in comparison to Roam. Like, I think that, I'm going to pull up my page on gamification, right? That's like a very broad concept level thing. And if I'm doing this in Roam, then the way that it lets you filter linked references.
Do you want to share your screen again, or you just want to talk about it?
Oh, I forgot that I wasn't sharing my screen. Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Go for it.
I'm just saying that, like, if I'm in Roam, then I don't really need, in a lot of situations, to make index pages. And just because of the way that they handle linked references and filtration of those, it's just it does a lot of that sort of work for you. But a problem with that is that that can lead to lazy knowledge management and like lazy information organization of like, oh, I'm just going to connect page reference user involvement and page reference user engagement. And then I'm going to be able to resurface that later.
Right.
But the only situations I'm going to resurface that is if I'm explicitly looking for the connection between those two concepts. Whereas in Obsidian, and really just any page-based system that has the bidirectional links, like I experienced this first when I was using Bear. When I was using Bear with a backlink script added onto it.
Yeah. Was it the script that I made or the script that Andy made?
I'm not sure. It was just something I found on Reddit. But I guess what I found is that if I wanted to properly organize the information, then I sort of like needed to have index pages every once in a while. And like index pages, I can interpret very broadly. Like you're seeing my screen right now, right?
Yes.
My Obsidian. Yeah. Like this page right here for gamification, I consider this an index page where I'm using this as the base layer of saying like, this is where these are the main directions in which you can go. You know,
like your start page.
Yeah, it's creating like these entry points for myself into my notes, because just having the backlinks is not enough.
Right.
If I'm looking through this set of backlinks, I don't always know why I should click on any of them, you know, or I might have such a huge list that like it's pointless doing that. So using file-based systems, page-based systems, I found that like, oh, if I'm writing, like game designers and behavioral scientists are asking many of the same questions, maybe I just want to like also put a link to that page on the gamification page. So that way I can ensure that I find it later. That's a situation where the limitations of the software, of the information architecture, I think are prompting people towards better knowledge management.
Right.
Now, that does, again, start to rely on this idea, though, that people take those cues. You know, like they need to see the limitations of the software and then think to themselves, oh, here I need to find a workaround. Like the only reason I found this was because I was using Roam before, and I was like, I want to replicate some of the sorts of things that I do in Roam, but I can't with its current functionality. I have to do like these index page sorts of things. And now I'm index page, maps of content, whatever. And now I'm taking that even back to Roam and like making some of these index pages as I go. And I'm finding that I'm better off for it. Like I guess all this really is to say that a lot of it just comes down to how you use the software. But the different softwares, they propel you in different directions. And
how you use it and intentionality of use.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Obsidian, it asks the user to be a bit more intentional, which I think is a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's very well said. And there's a group of people in Obsidian who define kind of these index notes as maps of content. And Nick Milo, another big contributor to Obsidian and forum moderator, has written and spoken a lot on that topic of maps of content. But essentially what you're talking about are the index notes that Nicholas Luhmann created as his entry points into his Zettelkasten, if you will. Yeah.
And I think that that point of calling it an entry point, I think is really valuable too. Just because it's like, if a lot of people like to talk about how when you're hyperlinking nodes together, you're allowing for bottom-up organization. Like ideas emerge over time.
Right.
But sometimes you need to take a little bit of a top-down perspective to flesh out the ideas that are supposed to be emerging, you know, like that does take a little bit of effort. But then on top of that, if I am like, imagine imagine for a second that like what I'm showing you right now, like this Obsidian database, like imagine that it is like uh, 15, 20 times the size of this. Like, I don't know. My private Roam instance, I have over 5,000 pages in it, which doesn't really mean the same thing as it does here. But like, I'm just saying, like, imagine you have all of these notes in your Obsidian and you're trying to come up with ideas related to a topic. I'm trying to write a presentation to give about gamification and failure states. So if I'm doing everything bottom up and I've got like tens of thousands, like 10,000 notes, then I'm probably just not going to find what I'm looking for. Or alternatively, I won't know where to start. Having like a top-down note like this, and just being able to see like, oh, on this page, like here are the things that I link to. That's my starting point. Totally and agree. I can do the bottom up exploration from there. I think that's really important. Top down, bottom up, they work together.
I like looking at my orphan notes, which to me means notes that I have not written about, that I have not synthesized into anything. And either why did I capture them? And some of them may have a very relevant reason. But I think looking at orphan notes can help me sort of see what I've not written about. But I like to, for me, sort of the threshold is if I'm going to take a note on something, if I'm going to commit time to capture a note, I want to use that to expand my thinking at some point. Now, it's perfectly okay if my interest wanes and I no longer am interested in it. That's fine. But it's an intentional decision to no longer do anything with that note versus I forgot about it and it's in a black hole.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting things, too, about writing in hypertext, especially when you take this mindset of, oh, I don't want to leave pages empty. Because with the way that I'm using Obsidian right now, it's going onto my website and it's not a great user experience if people are clicking on orphan notes and realizing like, oh, this doesn't go anywhere. There's not really anything to it. And oh no, I just wasted the reader's effort a little bit. So like I try to fill out each of these notes. But because like this whole thing is built to be interconnected and densely linked, then and also to be atomic, then a lot of times I'll fill out an orphan note and I'll realize like, oh, gosh darn it, here's this other idea that I need to flesh out in order to get there. So it's like writing in hypertext and trying to be atomic and fill in your notes, like that's essentially a recipe for just being prolific and writing a
creativity.
Ton. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think those moments are opportunities. Like, ooh, here's a gap that I want to fill that wants to be filled. And because these are topics that you've chosen, presumably they're of interest. Right? Either for school or for work or for personal, they're of interest. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think the design itself can help contribute or not for that. Okay, let's do a ending part 2.
Okay,
because this has been great. And I think you and I could keep going for a long time on this whole knowledge management space. But I really do appreciate the thoughts that you're putting into this. And I want to read more of the content on your site. I read a little bit as I was preparing for our discussion today. And when I first met you, gosh, a long time ago in the early days of Roam, met as in, Slack buddies.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate all that you're doing. And thanks for showing us how you use Roam and how you use Obsidian. And I want to say once again, make some videos on Obsidian because you're good at explaining things. You're really good at showcasing stuff. And obviously, I have no vested interest in Obsidian. I'm just a user, but I love it. And it's become really the foundation of my personal knowledge management system. And I love finding other people who are doing cool things and helping kind of showcase them to the world, all with the goal of let's create good stuff. Let's create that can make a difference. It's a challenge for all of us. So thanks for joining me today, Rob. Thanks for all that you're doing, and thanks for showcasing.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. It's I love nerding out about personal knowledge management products. I find them incredibly useful tools, and I think Obsidian is an excellent product. And I have a lot of respect for what the community is producing, and also for just the quality of product that the developers are creating and the level of polish that seems to go into it. Like I can't really think of anything right now where it feels half baked, like within Obsidian. Like it feels like it's all pretty cohesive experience.
It's cool. Thank you. Thanks for everything.
Thanks.